Hi, it's James Taylor here. I was contacted recently by someone who has a 9-to-5 job but wants to be a full-time creative professional. And so the advice that I gave to him is probably the similar advice that I would give to you regardless of whatever your creative endeavor is, whether it's as a writer, as a musician, as an artist, or as an entrepreneur, someone who wants to build their own business or a startup. And that advice was as follows. Rather than do the grand gesture of going into work one day and just saying, that's it, I quit, I've decided I'm going to start working in my creative endeavor, having no income at all from that creative endeavor up to that point, or very little income. Instead, I think you should think about it from a different stages perspective. So stage one of where you want to get to is to continue that 9-to-5 job for now, but have a level of income coming from your creative work that at least meets your basic needs. So that's your food, that's your heat, your rent or your mortgage, some of those basic costs. Get to that point first. So that's stage one. But still keep the 9-to-5 gig for now. And then the next stage, stage two, is where you're able to get the level of income from your creative work at the same level as your 9-to-5 gig. And so that stage two, you want to be there for at least 3 months, so you're sure that it's not just a one-off thing, income for that particular month, but you have a consistency around it. So then the question becomes, how do you get this creative income from your creative work up to the level of your 9-to-5 gig, so that you can then at that point then say to your boss or your 9-to-5 gig, I'm sorry, if you want to do it, I'm sorry, but I can now no longer do this job, I'm focusing on my creative work. How do you get to that point? So the most critical part here is around your time, and I want to give you a couple of strategies and ways to think about how best to use your time so you can find the time in a day and in your week to be able to do that creative work and still have the 9-to-5 gig. The first and probably the simplest way is just to get up an hour earlier every day. And I'm not an early morning person particularly, but I kind of force myself, especially if I'm in a writing period of what I'm having to do or having to really work on a particular project, I'll get up that hour earlier to focus on doing the work that I need to do. And if you get up an hour early and give yourself a target of writing those 500 words or 1,000 words every morning, then before you know it, you'll have that draft of that book. Likewise, if it's a recording, you can go maybe the other side if you're not a morning person at all, but just take that last hour, last 2 hours of your day where you go into the studio and you're writing the songs and you're doing the recordings and you're doing that work. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you're getting up an hour earlier, going to bed an hour later, and in that time, you're doing the research and starting to build out your minimum viable product. So that's the easiest way of doing it. The other way you're doing it is taking your weekends, and this is if you don't maybe have a family or other responsibilities, is then saying every weekend for the next X number of months, I'm going to dedicate to this new creative endeavor. So that could be as a musician, it could be writing the works for this new recording, or pitching and getting gigs. And so every Friday night, Saturday night, you're out there doing gigs. It could be as a writer, you're having these sessions where these long weekend writing sessions where you hit the coffee shop at 7 o'clock on a Friday and you just get through those kind of word count over those weekends. That's another way of doing it. Another way of doing it is something that the writer Roy Jenkins used to do, who had a 9-to-5 gig. If you don't know Roy Jenkins, he was a British politician. So he was a minister as well in the government. Yeah, he had a huge output of writing of his books. How did he manage to do that? Well, what he would do is he would take his vacation time to go away to a cabin or to a place somewhere, and he would write for that week or that 2 weeks, and he would have a couple of blocks of those every year, and that's how he would do his work. So somehow you've got to find that hour in the morning, that hour in the evening, or the weekends, or that vacation time where you can focus on doing this work. One of the easiest ways to find that extra time is cut out your media consumption. So that means cutting out how much TV you're watching, cutting out how much social media you're consuming. A decision I made very early on is that I can either be creating or I can be consuming. It's very difficult for you to do both. You have to kind of make a decision as a creative individual. I'm willing to be a bit boring and give up some of that other stuff in order to focus on doing the work and creating the art that you want to create. So if you find that time in that day, in that week, in that year to be able to do that creative work, then you want to start driving up your income from that creative work, so it then gets that stage 1, that basic level of income, then stage 2 where you can replace it. And at that point you're in a great position to be able to go to your boss at that 9-to-5 job and say, hey, I've loved working with you, but now I have another calling. I have this creative calling as an individual, and that's what I'm going to do. It requires discipline, but without it, you will not be successful as a creative individual. Hi, it's James here. Did you enjoy that episode? If so, there's 2 things that we can do to continue the journey together. Firstly, I would love if you to subscribe, give us 5 stars and leave a comment. Secondly, if you go to jamestaylor.me and enter your name and email address, I'm going to send you some free goodies all around creativity and innovation. Look forward to continuing the journey together.